There is a moment in the gardener's year that feels almost ceremonial. The storms have passed. The harvest is in. The first hard frost has cleared the noise of abundance from the land. We walk the garden slowly then, not looking for color or yield, but for structure. The annuals are gone. Their brief, brilliant performance has ended. What remains is quieter and more honest. The bare limbs of the fruit tree, the woody base of the lavender, the underground certainty of mint spreading where it always does. This is the perennial bed. It may look dormant, it may appear sparse, but it carries a promise written into its cells. It will return. Its life is not measured in a single season, but in rhythm. It knows winter and does not argue with it. It rests without surrendering its identity. I've been thinking about this as a way to understand the self. Over this long conversation, we've tended many plots. We've prepared soil, planted intention, watched frequency take shape. We've endured storms and survived droughts. We've composted what went wrong and celebrated small, honest harvests. But beneath all of this seasonal work, beneath moods, roles, successes, failures, something quieter persists. Something sleeping without dying. Something returns with stubborn reliability no matter the weather. What is that in us? What grows back every season? The old teachers seemed obsessed with this question, though they rarely asked it directly. Instead, they planted images, seeds, soil, leaven hidden in dough, vines and branches, fields worked by patient hands. They trusted that understanding would unfold over time, the way a perennial reveals itself, not in a single bloom, but across years of return. They weren't describing personalities or achievements. They were pointing toward bedrock, toward the qualities that remain when the surface story keeps changing. A mustard seed becomes a shelter for birds. A buried grain breaks open to multiply. A hidden ferment changes the whole loaf. Nothing flashy, nothing forced, just endurance, transformation, and return. When I look back across seasons of my own becoming, I start to see a similar pattern. Beneath the annual dramas, the projects that succeeded, the ones that collapsed, the relationships that came and went, certain qualities keep resurfacing. They didn't always look the same. Sometimes they were strong, sometimes barely visible, but they returned again and again. Modern psychology, interestingly, stumbled onto the same terrain from a completely different direction. By studying wisdom traditions across cultures and centuries, researchers identified a set of core human virtues, traits that appear everywhere, valued across time, meaningful both personally and collectively. Not skills, not talents, deeper than that, character strength that seems native to the human ecosystem. They group them into six broad virtues. When I first encountered them, they didn't feel like a checklist. They felt like a garden bed's perennial zone of the self. There's wisdom, courage, humanity, justice, temperance, transcendence. Not ideals to chase, but capacities that reveal themselves over time. Wisdom, in this sense, isn't about having answers, it's about staying curious, loving learning, stepping back far enough to see patterns instead of just events. It's the part of the garden that keeps adapting, studying the climate, noticing what works and what doesn't. Even after disappointment, wisdom leans in rather than shuts down. Courage is not bravado, it's persistence, honesty, the willingness to stay present when retreat would be easier. Courage is the deep root system that holds when winds howl across the surface. It doesn't prevent fear, it allows movement in spite of it. Humanity is the bed of connection, love, kindness, social intelligence. It's the recognition that none of this grows in isolation. As one elder said, we are flowers in a single garden, sharing a common root. This part of the self returns again and again, even after betrayal, reminding us that connection is not naive choice, but a biological one. Justice concerns the wider ecosystem, fairness, cooperation, leadership. It's the instinct to tend not only one plot, but the shared soil. Justice understands that a garden thrives only when the whole system is considered, not just the most visible blooms. Temperance is quieter but essential. Self regulation, humility, forgiveness, prudence. This is the bed that prevents excess, the overwatering of ego, the unchecked spread of resentment. Temperance knows when to prune, when to pause, when to let something rest. And then there's transcendence, the part of the garden that opens upward. Gratitude, hope, awe, meaning, beauty. This is where the self remembers it belongs to something larger than productivity or survival. It notices dew on a spider web. It looks at the stars and feels oriented rather than small. What strikes me most is that all of these are already present, every one. The difference between us isn't whether they exist, but which ones have grown strong through the seasons we've lived. One garden leans toward courage and justice, another toward humanity and temperance. The combinations are endless, more unique than fingerprints. This means identity isn't something we invent from scratch. It's something we recognize and tend. Over time, it becomes clear which qualities feel essential, which feel energizing rather than draining. These are the perennials. They show up even when motivation disappears. They return after collapse. They reemerge when the ground warms again. Knowing this changes the work. The goal stops being the creation of a perfect seasonal display, constant happiness, constant success, constant bloom. Instead, attention shifts toward stewardship, toward tending what is already native, toward strengthening what reliably returns. Storms still to come, droughts still stretch the land, but when they pass, something familiar breaks the surface again, a value, a strength, a way of being that refuses to die. This is where the ancient metaphors become practical. Seeds planted in plain sight unfold their meaning slowly across years of living. The perennial self isn't dramatic. It doesn't shout, it waits. So we walk the inner garden in the quiet season, not with regret for what has faded, but with reverence for what remains. Here is a strong trunk of honesty. There, the tangled, resilient root of love. Over there, the dormant but potent bud of hope. This is not what we achieved. This is not what happened to us. This is what grows back. And no matter how many winters come, it always remembers how.